Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. Um, I'm Pam Wycliffe. This is Lunch with the League for June. And we are going to have our program and we're going to start now. And there's a few things that I need to say at the beginning, as I do every time. So some of you, all of you, are probably very familiar, but I'm going to go through them again. We, as a League of Women Voters, never support or oppose a political party. We are nonpartisan. We are a political organization, but we're nonpartisan. We encourage informed, active participation in government. We don't support or oppose a political party or a candidate. But we do have two separate, distinct roles. One is voter services and citizen education. We present an unbiased, nonpartisan information about elections, about the voting process and issues, and we also have an action and advocacy arm. We are nonpartisan, but we do study issues, and we use our positions to advocate for or against particular policies of public interest. So because of all that, the comments and the opinions you may hear from people today aren't necessarily those of the League, but of the person speaking. We will be here from noon till 1. Generally, and I talked to Juan, and I believe you're good with the half hour thing. So he is going to speak for the first half hour. And then after that, the second half hour will be for question and answers. And if you would please put your questions or comments down in the chat, and then Juan can read those as when it comes time for the question and answer. If everybody would please remain muted during the talk. And I guess for more information about the League, please go to lwvsouthbend.org. And there you will find all that we stand for, as well as links to the state and to the federal or to the International League of Women Voters. There is a little bit of news from our local chapter, and that is join the League the evening of June the 29th for our Healthy You, Healthy Democracy Voter Suppression Walk and Talk. We'll listen to a podcast on voter suppression while enjoying a walk along the St. Joe River. Then we'll gather for a conversation at Howard Park Public House, and details and the link to RSVP are on the League website, on Facebook, and on the League news updates that you received earlier this week. Also, the League is looking for volunteers in several areas. Check out the League's news update for details and contact information. And also that is the same League address, lwvsouthbend.org.
Well, they didn't let me in.
Pardon?
Okay.
They didn't let me in here. Invite.
Peggy, I'm going to mute you. Penny, I'm going to mute you there. Today, our speaker is Juan Constantino. He is the executive. Thank you for allowing me the shorter version. But I wish you would say what your whole name is when you do speak. Executive Director of La Casa de Amistad. He is a Holy Cross College alumni, and he started his career at La Casa in 2016 as a programming assistant. And then he grew into Director of Development at the center, and he kicked off a $3 million capital campaign to expand its reach and programming. He then moved with the whole La Casa to a newly renovated facility in June of 2021 and was voted the new executive director in September of 2021. It's been a busy year in the midst of COVID. Juan is also actively involved in the community as part of the Advisory Council for Young Professional Network under the South Bend Regional Chamber, is on the Indiana Latino Institute's Legislative Advisory Committee, and a member of the Refugee Steering Committee for South Bend and St. Joe County to support the resettlement of a number of Afghan families. Juan is a DACA recipient. He is 28 years old, a son of immigrant parents, and a product of this community. And Juan, it is your stage now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And it's absolutely a pleasure to get a chance to tell you all a little bit about what La Casa's got going on, maybe even share a little bit about my story and then ways to engage. So once again, my full name is Juan de Dios Constantino Lara. So it's my middle name and then my two last names. So it's my father's last name and my mother's last name. But we'll get into that a little later. But La Casa de Amistad is a youth and community center that has been in our community since 1973. October of this year, we will celebrate 49 years being here in the South Bend community. La Casa de Amistad actually translates to the house of friendship from English, from Spanish to English. And its original roots were founded by a number of folks here in the community that are still around, community leaders like Benito Salazar, and then who we consider our founder, Father John Phelan, CSC priest, who initially wanted to support teens whose parents were migrant farm workers. So the students were traveling from place to place across the country, depending on the harvest. And that also means you go from one academic institution, one school district to another in a different curriculum. And over time, the students get behind, don't have a support system. And in the early 1970s, to be a Latino or even immigrant or migrant serving community center wasn't so popular, but maybe the beginning of a movement across our country, especially here in South Bend. And so in 1973, we were founded and started programming for youth with partnerships with Boy Scouts, just providing a space for the teens to get academic support, a space for the students to be able to play music and interact with one another in somewhat of a safe haven. Well, our community leaders and our founders were like, man, we've really got to incorporate this organization. And so in 1975, we officially became incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit agency. And so then La Casa's history really takes off. From that incorporation, La Casa de Amistad purchased a home on the west side of South Bend on Warren Street. It actually still stands as we speak. It's just a residential home now, but it is still there. And La Casa very quickly grew out of that space. So in the mid 80s, a couple of things happened. One, La Casa de Amistad partnered pretty closely with the United Way, and we became a United Way agency partner, which meant the United Way would be donating some funds over to the center to support its programming. But along those same lines, La Casa de Amistad had to grow. What was just initially programming for teens whose parents were migrant farm workers transformed into something so much more. Those teens got older, the families decided to settle in town. Those families got larger. And so as the kids grew up, the question was, well, where do we get daycare or childcare, or how do we educate our kids? And so in the mid 80s, we launched a preschool program known as Yo Puedo Leer, I Can Read preschool program, entirely bilingual since its founding. And we still have that preschool program today. So the kids grew up and they're 3 to 5 years old, and then they got to transition into the school system. So now the parents are doing, well, yeah, you got academic programming for the teens, but what about the elementary kids? So how do we help them? And so Crece Conmigo, Grow With Me was founded. And so then now we have academic tutoring for the kids. But it wasn't enough to just provide academic tutoring for the students and support the youth, but our parents also needed help. Many times it was, where do we find a food pantry? Where can we get help and resources? And so La Casa de Amistad also established a food pantry for families who most needed it. But then above and beyond that, La Casa de Amistad became just a place where our families knew they could just stop by and ask a question. And so families would go to La Casa and say, well, where do I enroll my kids? And so we would connect them to the bilingual department within South Bend schools, or how do I pay my utility bill? Because I don't know how to read English, let alone speak English. So this is going to be a hard conversation for me to have and don't really know where to get started. So how do we empower our families? And then technology began to become a thing, like computers and the age of the internet. So then our families are doing, how do we use a computer? What does the internet mean? And so then La Casa de Amistad in the middle of a building started its computer lab and started doing computer skills courses for our families and so forth. So what was once a home on Warren Street, there was a moment where we said we have to expand. And so they purchased what used to be an old Polish department store on the corner of Meade and Dunham Street, an 8,000 square foot facility that we resided in for about 35 years. La Casa's most recent previous location, 746 South Meade Street. That old Polish department store had 8,000 square feet in it. Upstairs, the Sisters of the Holy Cross lived, and downstairs programming happened. And then we eventually transformed the garage into the food pantry. The center transformed its asphalt lot in the back into a basketball court for our kiddos. We transformed the basement into tutoring spaces for our kids. We eventually transformed the second floor into youth programming for our students as well. So we'd have the teens in the basement, the elementary kids upstairs, and on the first floor was a computer lab and a preschool. Then we created a lobby space for our families to be able to come in and just ask questions. And in the midst of all of that, as the community had a question or as the community had a need, they would make it well known, and we would track that and say, okay, well, how do we create that program? Or does someone already have that program? And if they don't, what role do we play in that? As we talk about that history, we went from providing educational program for our kids, launching a preschool, doing a food pantry, to eventually our parents going, well, what about us? Yeah, we got computer skills classes, but how do we learn English? Who's going to teach us? And so then, like I was like, well, we'll connect you. And so we rented out space in what is the Mary Crest building on Western Avenue on the third floor, 5 classrooms, 4,000 square feet, all in. And so in that wing, we had 3 levels of English classes, from introductory to more complex, robust English learning at level 3. And then we launched citizenship classes, which now have been going on for just over a decade. We had so many of our families that had the possibility to qualify and apply for citizenship, but you've got to learn the 100 questions on that civics exam just to pass the test. And so someone should create a program where they teach us not only English, but while we learn English, we also get to learn the answers to the civics questions and even get practice with the interview. And so La Casa de Amistad citizenship classes were started. Well, shortly after that, it wasn't enough to just have the classes, but there's certainly not an abundance of bilingual attorneys, let alone bilingual immigration attorneys in town. There was maybe 1 or 2. And so the community said, what would it take for La Casa de Amistad to launch a nonprofit legal clinic? And so we said, well, what would it take? There was an accreditation through the Department of Justice at the federal level. And we said, well, let's apply for accreditation. Let's see if we get approved as a site. And if we get approved as a site, then let's find an employee, let's get them the accreditation. And then we'll basically be able to help someone apply for residency, apply for citizenship, maybe apply for a visa, and a number of things. So in 2015, La Casa de Amistad launched its nonprofit immigration legal clinic. So now, not only were we helping folks practice the civics exam questions, we could also take on their legal case at a third, if not a quarter of the cost of what an attorney would charge. And so we made it a more equitable avenue for folks to have access to legal services. And to date, that program in the last 11 years has seen over 1,000 individuals become sworn in U.S. citizens, which has just been beautiful. And actually, the League of Women Voters, when we had the swearing in ceremonies, right after the swearing in ceremonies, would staff a table to make sure we got folks registered to vote. So we are waiting for those to come back. We'll get into this more, but hopefully we bring one into our new facility one day. But just to show you how full of a wraparound comprehensive service the center has done for decades. And what that has transformed into ultimately is a trusted place, a trusted agency that the community know they could go to ask a question, to lean on, to just support, or whatever it may be. Or if someone needed help, they say, well, just go to La Casa. Maybe they don't have it, but they'll give you an answer. Just go to La Casa. And for someone to have a place like an anchor institution like a La Casa de Amistad, where you could just go and ask a question, or just go, hey, I don't need your help, but I'm new here. Where are the grocery stores? Where can my kids go to the park? What are the schools? Are there bilingual schools? Where do we get this information? What's the church with the Spanish mass? I mean, questions that where else are you going to go to get those answers? If not a trusted place like La Casa de Amistad, or maybe a neighbor that could maybe connect you within that regard. But since then, La Casa de Amistad just became this trusted organization. And what was once, 4,000 people a year grew to 6,000 people a year when we had the previous administration in office. So in 2017, with a number of different policy changes, some rhetoric that came down the pipeline that really targeted immigrants in our community, a lot of our community members are wondering what was going to happen. Were they protected? Did they have to hurry and adjust and become US citizens so that everything was going to be okay? And this grand push to say, I want to be a US citizen so I have the ability to vote and so that I have a voice in this process the next time around. And so it was 4,000 people a year, became 6,000 people a year. What was once citizenship classes of 50 students became 100 students. What was once 250 legal consultations became 500 legal consultations, all in the span of 1 year. And what was once an operating budget of 450,000 became 650,000 because we were simply spending that much more money on time, resources, and supporting our community above and beyond that. So as that happened, we knew, okay, we're doing a lot more. We're much busier. We're seeing a volume of people that we cannot handle. People were standing in our lobby. We had to do a waiting room in the computer lab because it was that overwhelming. So we said, what would it take for us to go into a capital campaign, and how do we get there? Well, first it started with some strong fundraising, and Give Local St. Joseph County happened in 2017. It was kind of our first taste of being able to fundraise at a higher level. And then we were able to build enough of a cash reserve to say, maybe now we can begin to think about doing a down payment on a property that we can fundraise against. So in 2019, we started that search. We looked high and low and everywhere across the board for a location on the west side of South Bend, where we were for decades. We couldn't find anything that made sense. Anything that we found was either too small or way too big. And because of the industrial strip that we have on Sample Street, just in remediation for EPA would cost us millions of dollars. And we're like, we have to be good stewards of the dollars that we get. And so we looked outside of the west side, and then a facility became available on South Michigan Street, what used to be the old Xavier School of Excellence. And for some folks who've been around a while, I believe it was the Bus Brothers furniture store on Michigan Street there. And so they had an asking price of $1.1 million. Like, boy, we don't know if we can afford that. But our realtor looked into it and said, well, they owe $750 on the building. Why don't we offer them that? And they said yes. We're like, okay, well, great. They said yes, but can we afford it? And so we're like, oh boy. What ended up happening is, as all these things aligned, right around that same time in 2019, there was a tornado that went through the Growing Kids on the south side of town off of Ireland Road. I don't know if folks remember that. There was a front page of the newspaper, destroyed their facility. Luckily, no one was in it. The first thing we did was reach out to Growing Kids and go, hey, is there any way we can help? We have a preschool. Do your kids want to enroll in our program? The owner said, no, but if you've got 15,000 square feet I can borrow, that would be helpful. We're like, well, we don't yet, but if we buy this building, would you rent it from us for a year while we fundraise? And so we did the math on it. Both attorneys got together. Their insurance worked with the attorneys. Their rental would offset the cost of the mortgage, some renovations, and leave a little bit on top for us to fundraise against for 1 year without us having to spend a dime. And we said, let's do it. Because if at the end of the day, if this doesn't work out, we've still got a solid facility that we can turn around and sell. And so the fundraising began August 6th of 2019 for our new campaign. This facility is 41,000 square feet and was 5 times more than what we ever had. We began to envision and imagine, could we put all of our classrooms from the Marycrest building and La Casa and expand our legal clinic and everything into this facility. And so in 2020, September of 2020, we officially did the groundbreaking. But what happened in 2020 as well was obviously COVID. So in March, I think it was March 9th, we were making the big announcement. We're getting ready to move. This is the campaign. That same Friday, COVID shut everything down. And despite the pandemic and the uncertainty of it all, we out fundraise ourselves by $2 million in a year. The community really stepped up. Various foundations, organizations, businesses, and beyond stepped up to support the community center. And so as the groundbreaking happened, as the renovations of it all happened, we officially moved into our building June of 2021, while at the same time, our executive director made the announcement that he had accepted another job and was going to be ready to move on. He did his part. He's leaving his legacy with the new facility. And so the executive director search began nationally. I'll be honest, I was very clear. I did not want to apply for that job. I was clear with our board, with my family, with our friends, that there was no way I had the ability or I had the knowledge or the experience of being a CEO of a nonprofit organization. One that was getting ready to move into a building 5 times its original size. One that needed to at least double its staffing. So I didn't apply for the job. 2 weeks after the deadline, a friend and a board member reached out and said, "Hey, Juan, I'd love to have a call with you. Can we chat briefly?" I'm thinking, oh man, we found the next executive director. Yes, I want to talk. Instead, it was, "Why didn't you apply for the job?" And I was like, well, I gave them all the reasons I just gave all of you. I'm 27 at the time. I don't have that experience. I've maybe only managed a person, and they were an intern. I'm new to learning fundraising still. I don't know how to operate a facility this big. It'll be so new for the organization, let alone myself. Our operating budget was $750,000. What is an operating budget looking at a 41,000 square foot facility? But what pushed me over the edge to submit my resume was the comment of, "You're not by yourself, and this organization has never ran by itself. You've got a community, you've got a board, you've got a staff, and a world around you of people that'll support you. At a minimum, give yourself a chance to say no." I said, "Okay, I'll apply." So I applied for the job. Long story short, they offered me the job in tail end of August, and I said yes. And so we moved into our 41,000 square foot building in June, did the ribbon cutting in October, and what was once 4,000 to 6,000 people a year, we started seeing that same amount of people in a month. We're now averaging 2,500 phone calls per month. We're seeing about 2,000 people walk into the facility regularly. Once we moved into the new facility and had legal occupancy, the first thing we did was launch vaccine clinics with the Indiana Department of Health at the state level and the county department. We saw our very first time 750 people come by for vaccines in the first day. And that was only 8 hours. And so we did it in a weekend, and then we saw 1,200 people. And we're like, okay, we just moved to this facility. The whole community does not know we're here. We've still got to figure that part out. But it didn't matter, because wherever La Casa went was where the community would go. And so this notion of you left the neighborhood, you left the West Side, you left the community simply wasn't true. Our community was waiting for us to grow and was longing for us to grow. As a matter of fact, before we even told the world that we were getting ready to move, we went into every single program, one by one, for about 2 months. And we gave them the presentation that we give at a ribbon cutting way in advance. So all of our families knew first before the community knew. The very first presentation we did, it was with our preschool parents. One of the dads looked like he just got off his 3rd shift job, was picking up his son. He's sitting in this presentation like, "What are you going to tell me? I don't want to be here. I'm trying to go." And we're done with the presentation. He raises his hand and he goes, I've got something to say. And we're like, oh boy, what's he going to say? He's upset we're moving. And the comment he said was, "It's about time. We've waited so long for this." That was the biggest reassurance we could have had or even asked for from our community. And then after that, it was like, well, how can we help? I'm a painter. I do drywall. I can do cleaning, or I can make some food, and we'll fundraise some funds to pay for the materials. And so this project came together by and with our community, because then our family said, well, we'll handle the demolition. And so our families, so we said, Ancon, hey, don't worry about the demolition. We'll do it with our families. And they said, well, we'll help you paint. All of our hallways got painted by one of our dads in his company who does painting. All of our kids helped move furniture in the classrooms that they have. And so it wasn't a matter of like, go get a big loan of $2-3 million and just pay the construction company to do it. We're like, no, we'll let them do the wiring and the things we need them to take care of well, but the painting and some of the drywall and spackling and moving of furniture, let us do that with our families and our volunteers. And so we did. And it saved us upwards of $150,000. And then corporations like the Prescanis of the world and the Lipperts, the Robinson Learning Community Center donated tons of furniture. And actually 90% of the furniture in this facility was given to La Casa de Amistad. You can imagine what commercial furniture costs, like desks and chairs, let alone conference tables. And for 90% of it to be given to the community center saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars. Every single one of our office desks were given to us. Every single one of our chairs, every single one of our round tables was given. And so the community really rallied around what we called our El Sueño, our dream campaign for La Casa de Amistad. And so now that we're in the facility, we're running 13 different programs. We've got our educational component, obviously the preschool, K-12, after school programming, as well as summer camps. We've got our adult education with English classes and citizenship classes and English and computer classes. We've got the front end for social services, referring folks out to a number of services. Unfortunately, in this world of COVID and everything going on, it can be, where do I get a vaccine or test, or when's the next one La Casa's doing it? Or it could be a woman in a domestic violence case that needs help in connection to Family Justice Center or the YWCA. So now we've forged and established stronger relationship with our community partners, because although we're the trusted agency, we've got other professionals in the world that do a really good job in some of these service routes, and we can't do it all. And so we've built a number of stronger partnerships throughout the entire region. And then our friends at United Religious Communities and Catholic Charities says, hey, we're gonna be resettlement agencies for some Afghan parolees. We'd like to have La Casa at the table. We're like, whatever we can do, you tell us. And so we started a clothing closet with jackets and toiletries and care packages for the family. So as soon as they arrived, they would come and get jackets and coats. With our legal clinic, we said, you know what, we'll take on all the legal work pro bono for every one of those families. And so our legal clinic has now recruited about 16 volunteer attorneys, as well as our team and paralegals, to take on 100% of their legal paperwork at no expense to our Afghan families. So we're actively fundraising and getting support from a number of folks to make all of that happen, offset expenses that come along with that. And then, of course, the transition of leadership has led to just a different pace, a different growth, a different structure. And so we've grown our youth program team by 4 full-time staff members and then 10 part-time staff members that are teachers, that are licensed teachers that are on break for the summer, but still want to be involved and work our summer camps. So they're helping with our summer camps, and that's all beautiful and great. But La Casa de Amistad as an organization will celebrate 50 years next year, October 17th. And we want to make a big splash and a big celebration for our community, for those who have been involved, for past directors, for just anyone that knows what La Casa stands for. And although we've been in South Bend and in St. Joseph County for 4 decades, it'll be 5 next year. We serve folks in Elkhart County, Wabash County, Jasper County, LaPorte County, Marshall County, Kosciuszko County, Southwest Michigan area, Lake County, and beyond. So folks are coming from all over the region because there is not another community center like La Casa de Amistad, even as far as Chicago. And so now we're having conversations with the governor's office, various community foundations across the state to say, hey, how do we replicate this model to support our Latino and immigrant community throughout the entire state? And what we're trying to do is replicate the model so that people can do it across the country. One of the most probably exciting things that have happened in the last couple of weeks was the South Bend Schools, in partnership with Elkhart Community Schools and a number of other partners, put together a conference known as the Thought Leadership Conference. Dolores Huerta was at that event, and she actually came to our building on Friday and took a tour of our facility. And she herself is building her own community center in Bakersville, California. And she goes, Juan, I'd love to sit and chat with you about how we can replicate some of what La Casa has in our community center in California. So what the team here is doing, what the board is doing, what our founders have built and our predecessors have done is something that'll last a lifetime. And I'm just very humbled, blessed, and honored to be in this position to hopefully continue that legacy for for years to come. But I'll stop there, open it up to any questions, and just thank you all for your time. So let me open up this chat here. All right. Juan, they're saying in my faith, God doesn't choose the qualified, he qualifies. You're in good. You seem, thank you so much. Maybe I appreciate you guys. I know the citizenship classes aren't for everyone, not just Spanish speaking. Can you speak about the internationally welcoming atmosphere? Yes. So Cynthia, great question. Fun fact, although La Casa de Amistad, naturally in our name, it's in Spanish, and our mission says our Latino Hispanic community, through our legal clinic and our citizenship classes, we have seen folks representing 70 different countries come through our program. So it also begs the question, do we need to change our mission statement? And we're thinking about it. So you guys are getting kind of an inside scoop here, but as we look at the 50th anniversary celebration, what we do and how we tell all of La Casa de Amistad story, maybe we don't change it, but maybe we add a word, and that word is immigrant. And how do we add that to our mission statement? So it's something we are very closely and strongly considering internally as an organization. It is a big shift to change your mission statement, or maybe even add a word, but I think it would be more telling of all that we do here for our community. And let's see, would you also help refugees from other countries who are here in town? Our church has been helping a man trying to bring his family from Africa. Absolutely. So yeah, we can help anyone from, there's also a family from Guatemala that's in town that's seeking support from Catholic Charities. Right now, the way we've got everything set up, we're hyper focused on our Afghan parolees because they've got up until August to hit a deadline to submit their paperwork. So I will say 110% of our efforts are there at making sure that we hit that deadline before we spread ourselves too thin. And normally we wouldn't have a pro bono setup for all legal services because it's very costly to run our clinic. But yes, we will help anyone from anywhere. And if someone would like a legal consultation, they can call our center. We will transfer the information to our legal team, and then our legal team will get them set up for a phone call, figure out what's going on, how we can help them bring their family, apply, or what their options are, or if there's a better legal partner who specializes within that realm. So there's just so many different things that go into a legal case and what's going on that will depend on if we're the best equipped to take that on. When will your permanent citizenship come through? Oh, great question, Beth. So I myself am not a US citizen. I myself am not a US resident. I'm actually a DACA recipient, so deferred action for childhood arrivals, which means I'm on a rotating, renewing, temporary legal status here in the country. We immigrated to the States when I was 5 years old. And due to all the laws currently in place, there is quite literally not a single pathway or amount of money I can pay to adjust my status and become even a permanent resident or a citizen. There is literally nothing I can do. If I can raise $3 million for an organization, I promise you, I can raise any ridiculous amount of money for myself to make that happen. But there's literally not a legal avenue for me to take to adjust my status, unfortunately. So hopefully, Beth, as we're here with the League of Women Voters, as we vote about around policies and things that we do, maybe the big question around our broken immigration system and how it doesn't work for everyone is one to be taken seriously. I don't know what else I could do to qualify, but I'm certainly doing my best. Yeah, so there's the question to that, the answer to that one. Let's see, I have a friend who's plays a piano in great condition. She wants to donate it to a nonprofit. Would you have to do what the organization would have to be? Yeah, so we would love to. So we've actually been offered pianos a few times, maybe, and we would love to have one. But it's that question of moving it and paying to get it tuned. That if someone would be willing to help sponsor that and give us the piano, that would be the best option for the organization. And in full transparency, we're not quite ready yet for a piano. We are actively fundraising to renovate a music room. We've got 4 rooms in our lower level that need renovation, like carpet and some acoustic treatments. But once we get those done, we're gonna have a nice music room. We'd love to have a piano in. We'd love for someone to help sponsor to move it and get it tuned appropriately in the center. And then we'd be able to invite artists to maybe even teach some classes occasionally, or just for one of our kids to have access to a piano would be great. Okay, where am I in these questions? Okay. Do you help many undocumented folks? And has that been difficult for these folks? Settled for a bit? Yes. Tons of folks that are undocumented come to La Casa de Amistad. It's quite literally the only place they can go and feel like they can get support and resources and openly speak about their situation. So technically as an undocumented immigrant, which is what my status says, that I'm undocumented, I don't qualify for any state aid, any federal aid, or any state or federal programming in general. So anything that I do is we're paying out of pocket through a private entity, right? So, I mean, things like insurance. So if my employer didn't offer insurance, I wouldn't qualify for like Medicaid or Medicare programs or anything like that, or Obamacare, or any of those things. So we do help a number, probably a big bulk of the folks that we help are undocumented because there's nowhere else they can go. As you're undocumented, you can't get an in-state driver's license, you can't get an in-state ID. I mean, questions around documentation, questions around resources become quite the barrier, questions around employment. Obviously, you don't have a legal authorization to work in the country. That becomes another barrier. So it's just a number of things. Or saying, I'm undocumented, do I have a pathway to adjust my status is the other avenue there. So we do help undocumented folks, which is also, folks ask, do you tap into, state or federal assistance? Typically not, because of the restrictions around state and federal funding. So that does limit how much we can fundraise against. I think I'm sure there are some federal dollars. I know there are some state dollars that we can tap into in the hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million range at times. But we would have to be very selective as to how we account for that information, what data we ask from our families, and we'd rather say no to those dollars than restrict anyone coming to our building. Okay, let me catch up here. It seems the translation services available to hospitals and medical offices could also be used at La Casa. I think it's affordable. Yeah, so medical, okay, so it seems to the hospital. Yeah, so translation in like hospitals and like clinics and whatnot, they've got to go through a very specific training and get that certification to be able to translate it at that level. Could it be helpful at the center? Yes, absolutely. Thankfully, so we're fairly in tune of which clinics and which hospitals and around what times we've got bilingual support in those places. And so then we recommend folks out that way. Also, particularly for our undocumented community, knowing what clinics and resources exist, like the Health Links of the world and other places in the community where they can get health services. I will say 90% of our team is bilingual, probably 95% of our team, except for like 1 or 2 people. But she's learning very quickly. And we've got on staff English, Spanish, Arabic, Urdu, Pashto, a little bit of Russian. I'm sure I'm missing something, but we've got a pretty multi-talented team on our team. We just brought on a new team member who's specifically helping with our Afghan families, who was an Afghan diplomat underneath their president, and very, very qualified to do this work, overqualified, if I may add, but he feels very strongly about supporting the Afghan families and, as he says it, his people, and goes, I want to give back. And so he's with us. He is a paid staff member on our legal team. And so we really appreciate him being on board. Okay, Juan, are you expecting any families from Ukraine? We actually already helped a Ukrainian family that are already here, but we are waiting from ORR and the state level to hear if there's going to be a wave of families coming in from Ukraine through the state department. And if so, we're prepared to support. And actually our teams are going through TPS, temporary protective status training at the moment for their legal process, so that if and when we get families from Ukraine, that the team is prepared to take on some of those cases. I will. Okay, how about I adopt you? Would you? You know what? That would be awesome, except you'd have to adopt me before I was 18. And you'd probably have to argue with my mom a little bit. But you know what? And there is like this window where you can actually like adopt someone. I think it's actually before 16. And if it's messy, but if a U.S. citizen does adopt potentially an undocumented immigrant, they could have a pathway, and then all the intricacies of that. But I appreciate the 2 offers, NIMBY and Cynthia. I 3 offers. See, boom. Yes, yes, that would be great. Well, you can still adopt me, figuratively speaking. I appreciate you guys. Okay, Ray, Juan, what is the status of the mental health component? I've heard La Casa is working on. Yeah, Ray, I know we briefly chatted about it. So we actually have someone from the Mental Health Alliance, Michiana Mental Health Alliance, MHAM, coming by next week, Monday. And we are going to talk about what they currently have in programming and how we can maybe bridge and marry that to programming that we want to run at La Casa de Amistad. So for everyone here, when we moved into the new building, I think some of the questions were, what new programs are you going to run? I quite literally was like, we are just going to run the programs we have and the expansion of those programs, and then we'll think about new ones. But the one thing that we are looking to bring to the center is mental health services directly provided in our facility, entirely bilingual, and hopefully entirely pro bono to our families. I am sure we are going to be overwhelmed once that is done and open. And so, Ray, last we talked, it's probably been weeks, if not a month at a minimum, since we brought that up. But I will say it's moving pretty slow on the front end. We're trying to do this right and build a really strong foundation for success. That way, when we're running on the front end, we're moving quickly and supporting people right away. But we do think this will be something we start this year. We'll figure out how wildly we promote it. The last thing we want to do is tell the whole world and then have a wait list of 100. I think that also wouldn't be very just. So we're trying to figure out how we balance the two, get the funding around it, because our licensed therapists do need to be paid appropriately. They also have lives and families they want to sustain, but they also want to be helpful and work in our center. So that funding component is, as always, the big one. It won't stray us away from the fight, though. So we are looking to create a fund to run that program, pay licensed therapists. And even if it's a cost shared model where, let's say, a family pays $20 or $30 for a session versus $180 or $225, could that be more attainable? And then we fill in the gap. Or do we have folks help sponsor those outside of grant dollars? So a lot to consider there. Also, how do we provide appropriate space for those families, and how do we continue to provide wraparound services for those families will be the big one. There are so many different players now in the mental health space. There are so many players that are very overwhelmed. And so if they've got major multi-million-dollar systems around it, we want to make sure that our $1 million system can handle, some capacity as best as we can. But Ray, we are actively working on it to answer your question. And I hope that once we are good to go, we make a public announcement via news, radio, our email list, as well as social media for our families to know far and wide. Okay. Are you still in need of volunteer citizenship classes? Lots of able people here. You know what? We may need a few volunteers in the evening class, the 5 to 7 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And folks can email Nancy directly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste her email here, so you guys all have it. And if folks would like to volunteer or check in with Nancy, if they would like to support the citizenship classes, we would greatly appreciate it. Sometimes the citizenship class, if we do have an abundance of volunteers, other times there are other ways you can help the legal clinic. With the number of Afghan parolees and families, we could actually use some paralegal support. You don't have to be a trained paralegal, but like doing things like scanning documents and copying and filing saves our attorneys a ton of time, so they can do some of the other work. So there's also room to volunteer in general and support our immigrant community outside of the citizenship classes. But I put Nancy's email in there. If folks are able and willing to want to support, certainly reach out to Nancy directly. She'll be your best contact there. Have you ever asked LIPRA to employ and sponsor citizenship for any skilled laborers and professionals who are either applying or undocumented? So LIPRA components, yes. So we were very connected to LIPRA, and actually Darla Hernandez LIPRA, Jason LIPRA's wife, is the president of our board. So there's that piece of it. But they do bring in folks and sponsor folks for employment, especially in this uptick of not having enough folks to work. Do they sponsor people? Yes, they have in the past. That is a pretty tedious process. And the way you get sponsored is basically you're an individual that they found are looking to sponsor for a visa because there's nobody else in the area or in the country qualified to do that specific job. Is very short and very brief how that sponsorship works. Also, if I did qualify for anything like that, I would have to be a Lippert employee. So I'd have to leave La Casa and work for Lippert. I can't say that's the most exciting thing I want to do in my life. But goodness love them. I love what they do. I don't know that I'm meant for the RV industry though, but they do sponsor and have sponsored various folks and are good people over there. Okay, let's see. Would it be possible for the League of Women Voters to come to your facility to register voters and explain? Yes, and I swear I owe somebody an email on getting a meeting yes, we want folks to get registered to vote. I think particularly maybe even doing a presentation at the end of our citizenship classes, or for the 40 students that have passed the exam, how do we make sure those 40 get registered to vote? Yes, absolutely, 1000%. I made a comment to someone in passing, and again, I owe someone an email for the League of Women Voters. But what I would like to happen, and probably I'm the worst person to talk to about this, and you got to talk to our community outreach coordinator, but I would like to train our front end staff at the front desk how to register someone to vote and understand that process through and through very well. That way, when we literally see thousands of people coming in through the center, can we have a little flyer, are you registered to vote? And that's just a standard practice. And if they say, oh, I'm not, or how do I find out? Then we ask, are you a US citizen? You go through that process. And if they are, you look at where do they register to vote and how do we equip and empower them? People are coming to the center. We have the technology and we have the ability to register people to vote. How do we catch them where they're coming and where they are? So anyways, that is something I would like to get off the ground. I would like to make a permanent established piece of what our front desk does, is asking people, are they registered to vote, as quickly as we say, hi, how are you? And how can I help you? So the center sees 40 to 60,000 people walking in now a year is what we estimate will happen. How do we maybe catch 10% of that and register 4,000 people this year that are coming to our center, particular immigrant community? So great question. I again apologize. I owe somebody an email and we will get that ball rolling. Thank you for that, Jerry. I appreciate you. Any other? Well, here we go. All right. Has the dysfunction in America democracy brought any adjustments to teaching of citizenship? Yeah. Whew. Okay. So the previous administration had changed the test, and now it's back to where it was. So we're back to where we are. So we were back to our original curriculum of our citizenship classes. But how we teach in general and how we advocate has definitely shifted in terms of being also more on the advocacy front to talk about new policies happening in the area versus just here are the questions, here's how you do it, but here are also the policies, here's how we make sense of them. But it's also this fine line, as was mentioned early on, of not being partisan, but advocating against policy or for policy, and how that impacts people. And so being very, very tactful and not partisan on that front is a fine line to try to balance there. But we are doing it with our families. We are trying to empower them to let them know that they themselves can advocate for or against policies, depending on how they feel one way or another. We won't tell them what to think or how to think, but rather, here's the grand scheme of it all. And here's what you can do as a registered voter to have a voice in that policy. And as a tax-paying citizen. So there's that. And how do we contact the outreach coordinator? Yes, you know what? This is a great opportunity for me to just put his email in here. Camilo. Here is his email. Okay. Camilo is our brand new community outreach coordinator. He was special projects, but now he's handling all volunteer support. He's also, he oversees our front desk and trains our front desk team. And so he's very, very active on that front. It will also be helpful to actively educate your registered voters and get them to vote in every local, state, and national election. I totally agree, Beth. Can't agree with you more on doing that front, as well as everything else going on. So I think constantly advocating and letting folks know what's going on. I think being in spaces like this where you can ask direct questions, learn more about what's going on versus seeing like a news TV show or an article, which will give you a glimpse of what's going on. But until you talk to an actual person, it's hard to truly understand the impact of it all. So I do think being invited to space like these, I mean, from speaking to you all to speaking to high school students to speaking to university students, and actually really quick story. So I'm a St. Joseph High School graduate, the last class of the old school, 2012. But I went back, let's see, it would have been the year 2018 is what the student told me. So I spoke to the history class, the US history class, around immigration policy in my particular story, which I was surprised to let me do, but I got to tell my story to the students. I just ran into one of those students yesterday at Barnes and Thornburg. We did a food truck philanthropy event. And so I'm sitting with interns in the mayor's office that are having tacos, and I'm just connecting with them, seeing what's going on. And so I asked them each to introduce themselves. And one of the students goes, "You may not remember me, but you spoke to my high school class at St. Joe and Mr. McCarthy's US history class. And you told me your story and I'll never forget it." He goes, "Now I'm going to university in Boston." He goes, "And I'm looking to be an attorney." He goes, "I love La Casa. I still follow what La Casa does, and hopefully one day can continue to give back." I was just like, that was 4 years ago. He was a high school student, now going to university in Boston, is in town for the summer, interning in the mayor's office, and still remembers that conversation from 4 years ago as a high school student. So I will say the most powerful thing we can do is storytelling, listening to stories, and actively asking questions. So I can say at least, that one story lets me know we're at least somewhat on the right track here. And I think it's making an impact much further than we genuinely realize. Melly and I did work with La Casa voters and presented the steps of actually going to voting poll to do and how. I think it would be helpful. I think it helped with their comfort level. Yeah, absolutely. And also connecting with Nancy Flores, who's the director of the Citizenship and Immigration Program. She would be awesome to do a program like that with our families and students. And even if we did something more open-ended for the community in general, our auditorium is almost done. So we have an auditorium in this new building that probably fits 150 to 200 people. It's like going to be fully newly renovated and done in the floor will be done in the next week, but we'll have audio and stage and all of that done in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And so that'll be an awesome room where you can run a full presentation, do booths and tables, folks can walk around. I mean, it'll just be phenomenal. So any events you all are thinking about wanting to have or wanting to partner on, we have space and we have it in abundance. So let's utilize it to empower our community. Okay, Juan, you mentioned furniture from the Robinson Learning Center. Are there other ways Notre Dame is supporting La Casa? How about the other area education institutions? Yeah. So the Robinson Learning Community Center gave us some furniture. They were actually the first ones to donate some furniture once they heard about our big move, and then they were making their big move to their new community center. So it all kind of aligned really well. The university was actually super helpful. And Lou Nani, who's their head of fundraising for the university, and raises like $1 billion a year. He actually suitably consulted and let us soundboard with him almost every other month. And we said, are we on the right track? Are we talking to the right people? How are we mapping this out? So Lou was very helpful. The university itself donates tens of thousands of dollars annually to programming. And they've now increased that across a number of different departments. Their Department of Romance Languages, as a class requirement, have to volunteer at La Casa de Amistad. So they actually provide hundreds of volunteers every semester for our youth programming. And that's such a beautiful experience. We actually have many students who start as freshmen and come back all the way through their senior year. So it's been beautiful to have that partnership, but from partnerships with Mendoza to the CROG to Kellogg to Kiel, so many different departments, the HR department, university events and enterprises, like so many different departments partner with La Casa de Amistad. It's awesome to see because they each also have their own budgets. So they get to also give independently. And they have the Institute for Latino Studies. So the director, Luis Fraga, there is a very strong supporter of La Casa de Amistad and a good friend. And so Dr. Fraga also supports. He actually invited me to speak to their Latino student commencement. So I got to be the keynote speaker to the Latino graduates of the class of 2022. So that was something I appreciated very much. It was beautiful to be with the families and the students, and hopefully give them an opportunity to come back and continue to support. But yeah, great question, Ray. And actually, I've got a meeting with Tim Sexton in the very near future to talk about continued support for the community center. Congratulations on being named and honored South Bend Regional Community YPN. I'm actually not a 40 under 40, Beth. I didn't get it. I haven't been nominated yet. My friend Kristen got it. But one of these days, I mean, I'm only 28, so we've got 12 more years of being able to qualify for 40 under 40. But I did not get it, not yet, which is totally okay. But I am on the YPN advisory board and council, and most recently, so you guys are getting all the inside scoops here. I just got voted in as part of the IUSB advisory board. So I'll be on the IUSB board. So I'm excited. So that's your other part of your question, Ray, is how do the other educational institutions get involved? All of them are involved actively. So the tri-campus area from Holy Cross College to St. Mary's College. St. Mary's College constantly provides volunteers and interns. Same thing with Holy Cross College. IUSB is very closely connected to the center, as well as Bethel, even Ivy Tech comes on over, and we've got a great partnership with Ivy Tech, particularly for our adult students that need access to certifications, education, and beyond. So the center is got its hands a little bit everywhere, which is probably, if I'm running crazy or you don't hear from me, it's because I'm either dealing with new solar panels that are going on our roof later this year. We're really excited about that. We just got the roof replacement, so it's super exciting. It'll be 100% offset. So we'll be saving about $25,000 in electricity bill that we'll be able to reinvest back into our programs. We got a playground that'll be built this fall. We've got 17,000 square feet of our lower level that's going to get fully renovated with new LED lightings, hallways, and restrooms. The auditorium will be done in the lower level. We just finished renovating our art room, so our kids now have an art room that they're using. Summer camps just started last week, Tuesday, because of the Memorial Day weekend. And we used to have 45 kids total in summer camps. We will have 150 this summer. So things are going very, very well for the center. And we're able to actually go solar thanks to an anonymous donor who decided to make a contribution of $275,000. So some folks are being very, very generous to the center, above and beyond belief, more than we're asking for, and more than we could possibly imagine. So we're very blessed to have this community, and thank you all for your time.
There was one, didn't La Casa also win an award last year? You need to mention that, and then as soon as you do, we'll be done.
Okay, yeah, there's so many things. La Casa was the recipient of the Layton Award for Nonprofit Excellence. It's $150,000 endowment match, dollar for dollar. And so we have an endowment. It's only at about $200,000, but if and when we hit that match, it'll grow to $500,000. And we also call that the Nonprofit Hall of Fame in our world. To get that award, that's only awarded once every other year, is pretty prestigious and speaks volumes to the organization. And we couldn't have been more thankful for that. So we are in the midst of that fundraising campaign. So if you would like to give specifically to our endowment, you'll double your contribution and endow it for a lifetime for La Casa de Amistad. Thank you for reminding me on that plug.
Yes, Juan Constantino, I think not only is it a wonderful organization, but they have a wonderful executive director.
Oh, thank you.
And one that has apparently it's very good that they didn't listen to you when you said that you couldn't do the job. Thank you so much for coming today and for being part of this. You have taught us a lot, and you've shared your time and all of your information. Thank you so much. And we look forward to having you. You're right, Ronaldo. Sam was a hard somebody to follow, but I think you're doing a fine job in following. Perhaps maybe you'll be leading him one of these days. Anyway, hope that League of Women Voters can be present in your building at one of these times and be helping you out as much as you've helped us. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody else for coming. It has been wonderful. The second Friday of next month, we will have another lunch with the League. Thank you, one and all. Have a good day. It's beautiful out.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.